This is the story of all Africans.
This is your story.
This is my story.
This is our story.
The door of no return.
The church on top of the women's slave dungeon.
The female slave dungeon.
Remaining clothes of July 2016 exhibition.
Rainwater was kept here for female slaves. They were using it to bath before being raped.
The governor's balcony.
The governor's kitchen.
His food was prepared by only officers.
The biggest female dungeon taking up to 1,500 captive women.
The governor apartment.
So there was a man called John Diego de Zambo. He was appointed by King John II of Portugal to lead others to build this castle, simply to serve as a trading post. That was to protect their trade and their traders. So the idea of building this castle was to serve as a trading post. Yes, they started building it on 1st January 1482, and they were able to complete the first phase in 4 years, which they named it after the archbishop in Portugal. He was called George. So the actual name of this castle is St. George's Castle. But we call it Elmina Castle simply because of the name of the town. They went on trading goods. Yes, they went on trading goods for about 25 to 30 years before they shifted their interests from goods and slaves. So transatlantic slave trade started somewhere 1510. That is not long ago when America was discovered. By who history claims discovered America, Christopher Columbus. So when this evil trade started, the same ground floor rooms that were used as storerooms were converted into dungeons, where human beings were kept. Talking about the Africans who were kept in these dungeons for sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 1 to 2 months before they were put on the slave ships, and also covered about 6 weeks before they got to a new world. They were transported across the Atlantic Ocean, hence the name transatlantic slave trade. And they came from Europe to Africa, Africa to New World back to Europe. Hence this trade is also called a triangular trade. Yes, please. Yes, I can say that the Portuguese initiated it. I'm talking about the transatlantic slave trade. I'm not talking about slavery or slave trade. I'm talking about this particular one, transatlantic slave trade. Because apart from the transatlantic slave trade, we can talk of the trans-Saharan slave trade and also the indigenous slave trade, which was in existence before the arrival of the Europeans. Yeah, the Portuguese initiated the transatlantic slave trade, but then once a beginning was initiated, it became self-continuing. So the other nations that came or that followed the Portuguese also shifted from goods to slaves. You know, in the year 1637, that is 155 years later, this castle was captured from the Portuguese by the Dutch. They repaired all the destroyed parts. They opened the dungeons to contain more captives, and they also continued the trade. The Dutch were here for 235 years. In fact, they were here to the time transatlantic slave trade came to an end, before they willingly sold this castle to the British in 1872. So in 1872, transatlantic slave trade was over, and the British were here. The question is, what did they do here? They used this castle as their sub-administrative center. That does not mean that they never took part in the transatlantic slave trade. They didn't engage this castle. And as the Dutch were doing in Cape Coast Castle, as British were doing it in Cape Coast Castle, Dutch were here, these were in Accra. So somewhere along the line, all the European nations that came to them, Gold Coast and now Ghana, shifted from goods to slaves. In the Second World War, that is 1939 to 45, I am now talking about the British. They brought some men from English-speaking West Africa countries. They brought some men from English-speaking West Africa countries. They trained them here. They sent some of them to India. Others were sent to Burma to fight for them. That group was called Royal West African Frontier Force. Now, 3 years later, that is 1948, British converted this castle into police training school. And in the year 1957, the then Gold Coast and now Ghana actually had independence, so we took over from the British. Now, in the year 1979, that is 44 years ago, all the forts and castles in Ghana were designated as World Heritage Monuments. That is by World Heritage Foundation under UNESCO. Now, this castle is 541 years. This castle is 541 years. You know, it is the oldest, and also the largest castle in sub-Saharan Africa, and also in the world. That is in terms of trans-Atlantic. This is just a brief history about that. Any question?
Did I understand correctly that at one point there was the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the British all controlling different areas?
Yes,
and participating in the transatlantic?
Yes.
Wow.
Even the German, they were here, Swiss were here.
So they came here to trade in goods.
Yes.
And then at which point did they decide that they now want to trade in people?
Yes. When did the ships come? The ships came in somewhere, like I said, somewhere 1510. It started before 1510, but it was 1510 that things took a dramatic turn. It was somewhere 1510 there about that. They started transporting Africans from Africa to the New World. They started taking transporting Africans from Africa to Europe. We are not talking about that one. We are talking about those who were transported across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, Americas and also Caribbean islands, where they were enslaved. Yes, if they said that not long ago when America was discovered, they realized that the land was fertile. So they started farming. Now when they started farming, they used the Native Americans called the Amerindians or the Red Indians. The history says European diseases and also work decimated the indigenous population. So common sense and humanity dictated that the killing of the natives should stop. So they stopped using them. And when they stopped using them, a need came for them to look for another source of labor to replace the natives. So they needed people to work for them. Now, it was then that one Catholic missionary called Bartolomeu de las Casas gave a suggestion that they should try Africans. Said Africans were strong and also already farmers. And look, by that time, some explorers had gotten to this part of the world, so they had fair idea of the country. They were even having Africans in Europe because they had started taking Africans long ago. Somewhere 1441 was when they started. We are now talking about 1510, so about 100 years. Yes. So what happened was that they took some Africans from Europe. They were taken from Spain to Hispaniola to try or to use them as experiments. And yes, in line with what the priest suggested, they were strong and also fit enough to do the work. So they said that from that very time coming, the demand for Africans started coming in. And that tended to be the beginning of the transatlantic slavery. It was then that they started taking Africans from Africa to New World. They never took them, they never continued taking them from Europe to the New World. No, they started taking them from the source. Instead of taking them to Europe, they started I would say that the destination changed to Americas. So it was then that we say that transatlantic slave actually started. And you know that it was somewhere, yes, 1619, yes, the first Ghanaians were taken Jamestown to Jamestown. That's why in year 2019 we had the year of Britain. But later when the Dutch saw the castle for British, they used it as classrooms. That's for the light color skin children. We call it for the mulattoes. Now it is a museum. So this has gone through four. It started as a church, slave market, to school, and now it is a museum. Very powerful. When the transatlantic slave trade was at its peak, about 600 men were shed and put in these dungeons. Don't forget, transatlantic slave trade lasted for not less than 362 years. So for that long, Africans were continuously kept in these dungeons for some weeks or some months and put on the ships, the slave ships, and transported to the New World. Now the soldiers, the traders, and also the missionaries were staying in the first floor rooms, all around. Then the second floor, that section, that was the deputy governor's quarters. But the third and so the final floor was the governor's apartment. So in this castle, wherever somebody lived was determined by the person's class or the person's rank or status. Yes, it was in the form of a hierarchy. Before we see the female slave section, I think I need to let you know that it was in that room. In fact, let me first of all talk about the top. That's a watchtower. We have another one here, yes. Another one there, making three. They were built by the Dutch to protect themselves. You see, as the Dutch were here trading slaves, British were in Cape Coast Castle trading slaves, but they were enemies. They were not business partners. They were rather business competitors and even enemies and fighting for supremacy. So the watchtowers were built by the Dutch, and some of their soldiers put up there to keep an eye on the British. They said that he was brought with his family. So the king and his retinue were kept there for 4 years. He later exiled from here to Freetown in Sierra Leone for 1 year and finally transferred to Seychelles Island in Indian Ocean for 23 years. They brought him back here in Ghana in 1924. He died in 1931. He died at the age of 59 years. But then he spent 28 years in captivity. And possibly you might have heard something about Ya Asantewaa. That is the queen mother of Ejisu. The very woman who led Ashantis to fight the British when she was 60 years, just to retain the golden stool, which is the spirit of Ashanti. She was kept in the other one. That is, she was also captured during the Boer War, Ya Asantewaa, 1900-1901. She was also kept in that one for 1 year and later sent to Seychelles Island. Unfortunately, she died in Seychelles Island. That's where the grandmother died. You go up, but before you go there, you see, yes, as I said, apart from the Portuguese church and those two cells there, the other ground floor rooms were converted to dungeons. Now, when the ships had come for the captives to be transported, they brought the men out from the dungeons. So here in the yard, they chained all of them. Now, after chaining them, they were taken from here to go to the last room called the Room of No Return. Come with me. the last room for the captives. This room was called Room of No Return. And this gate is what we call the Gate of No Return. You see, the ocean was much closer to the castle back in the days when the transatlantic trade was going on. But now it has receded. Geologists attribute it to the movement of the earth. But we believe that it's because of the movement of the earth, that's why the ocean has receded. Though the ocean was closer to the castle, even touching the edges of the castle, they never brought the ships here because this part was not deep enough for the ships. So they built the ships some meters away from here. They brought small boats down there to catch the captives from here to the ships, and the transportation continued. They sent some of the captives to Brazil. We know of Suriname, Haiti, Java, Guyana, Bahamas, Sumatra, Jamaica, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Colombia, Liverpool, Manchester, and some other nations. They cried a lot here. Yes, at this point, in this particular room, they realized that coming back was far from imagination. No, this epitaph was put here to remember one of the Dutch governors. That governor was called Tets. Tets, L.J. Van Tets, that's the full name. No, Governor Tets was the last Director General of West Indies Company. That company came from Zealand, which is one of the provinces in Netherlands. You know, Governor Ted came here on 16th January 1758 and died 12 March the same year at the age of 41, just 2 months. We know and also believe that malaria might have killed Governor Ted. Because of malaria, yellow fever, cholera, and some other, I would say, tropical diseases, the Europeans did not come here with their wives. And even later termed this stretch of coast White Man's Grave. So the very coast that they called it Gold Coast, which they later changed from Gold Coast to Slave Coast, was teasingly termed White Man's Grave because of the rate at which they were dying of tropical disease. You know, they later realized that being posted to Africa was a dead warrant. Because of that, they did not come here with their wives, and for that matter, some of the female captives were raped. We'll get there. Just 2 months, this governor died and buried here. At that time, there was a pastor who was then residing here. The pastor was called A. Andres. He wrote this portion to serve as a tribute about Governor Tets. He said Governor Tets was a good man, honest, hard-working, and also God-fearing. Yes, that was what he said about Governor Tets. At the time of slave trade, yes, he was together as a God-fearing, hard-working. Please look at it. Don't be afraid. You know, this cell was for the European soldiers. Mostly the Dutch soldiers. Yes, the Dutch soldiers who got themselves drunk, and also those who went to the town without seeking permission from authorities. Because of this same problem, tropical diseases, you see, that was their biggest challenge. That was their biggest challenge. Some of them took to drink and they thought that would help them. But no. But you know that finally they got this medicine, quinine, or as I would say, quinine, yes, which helped but could not solve the problem. You know, as they were just having fun, the soldiers were having fun by taking in more alcohol to become intoxicated, and also some also went to the town to mingle with the locals because the town was just opposite the castle. And they did not go there to capture them and brought them here. No, they went there to mingle. That is it, because they were in good terms with them. And never think that those who became captives were just captured so close to the castles or forts where you know. They were brought from the hinterlands. Some were brought from Salaga slave market. Some were brought from Kintampo slave market. Some were brought from Nanya slave market. Some were brought from Pinkoro slave market. These 4 slave markets were or are located in northern part of Ghana. Some were brought from Sampa slave market, wrong half already. Some were brought from Assam Mansu slave market. It's here in Central Region. Ask me, how did they get here? They came on foot. They walked. So they had to climb mountains, pass through thick forests, cross rivers before getting here. Some were left in the forest to die slowly. So even before getting here, it was a test. It's a form of screening. If you get it, it means yes, you pass the first screen or the first test, then you move on to stay in the desert for 2 weeks, sometimes 1 to 2 months. If you are able to stand this ordeal, definitely you can also you can also stay in the new world or get there. So they were treated poorly, wickedly, just to get them screened, to get the fittest among them. No captive, no one, no African came all the way from wherever he or she was brought or wherever he came from to convince the Europeans to keep him or her here as a captive. No. Whoever brought here or whoever became a captive in this dungeon and finally enslaved in the New World was either captured by another African or the person was taken as prisoner of war or captive of war, or the person was forcibly captured or kidnapped and sold by the slave raiders. Go to northern part of Ghana. In Pinkoro slave camp or slave market, there was a slave there who was slave raider who was buried there. There were people called slave raiders who captured people and sold. You see, at that time there were tribes, empires, states, kingdoms. There was nothing like Ghana. No, so because of this unity among the African leaders, some of the African leaders, and also we had some greedy African leaders. So they were tribes were fighting tribes, kingdoms were fighting kingdoms, just to extend their territories and also take some people as prisoners of war, so to influence, for them to become stronger and powerful than the others. Yes. So intertribal was an effect because they kept the Europeans a lot of Africans. The locals to capture some Africans. That's why I told you that there was disunity among them. So there were tribes. This is tribe A, tribe B, tribe C. Today together we are called Ghana. We are one. Back then, tribe A is different from tribe B. If somebody from tribe A found here on the soils of tribe B, I'm from tribe A, right? Now I am in this land or this side which belongs to the tribe B, I will be seen by them as a spy or an enemy. I could easily be killed or captured and sold. That's why I told them there was this unity among them. So they were in good terms with the very community that they were operating, and they were even paying tribute to the chiefs. So no, they never went to the town, captured those people and brought them here. No. Whenever any tribe arose against that very tribe or the very community that they were, they even supported them. Oh yes. So I've made mention of the book, A History of Indigenous Slavery. It will let you know the role played by the Africans in the transatlantic slave trade. It's one of the best books. That book, and also A Cry and a Lamentation from Our Ancestors. Yes, I will recommend for everybody. It will let you know the secret, how means of captive acquisition, as said, role played by the Africans, even the lines or difference between the trans-Saharan slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and the indigenous slavery. For sure, before the arrival of the Europeans, our ancestors were also having a certain kind of human trade. Just that those who became victims were never slaves. In fact, they were servants, they were indentured servants. Why? Because they had rights, they had freedoms. You see, those who found themselves or those who became victims could get married or got married, raise free kids, acquire property here and there. But the other thing I know is that a slave does not have any right or had just little rights, just recently. Yes, I said no one died here because it was for their own soldiers. They provided windows for their light. Now see this one. This was the condemned cell. Yes, the male captives who tried to save themselves and save their brothers and sisters. I told you there that no one voluntarily came, convinced them to keep him or her here and take him to the new world. Even those who were taken by them, they deceived the parents that, oh, at least give me one or two of your children to send to my country. If I want to go and give them better life. And they sent them, they never got them. For sure, they sent some and gave them good education, or they sent them and brought some of them back. You can talk of Jokoku's captain, who later wrote his thesis and said that God Almighty is not, or was not against slavery, because Abraham had slaves, you see. Talking about from Kwaku, who was also sent and brought back as a chaplain here and there. But most of them were sent there and enslaved. Some of the male captives tried to escape by making attempts to escape or by fighting European soldiers. Some also instigated others to revolt. I call them freedom fighters. The leaders of the freedom fighters were recaptured. Yeah, they were brought from the dungeons. That's the underground floor rooms. Put them here, they were left to die. So no one entered this one and went outside alive. So far, we have not actually entered and stayed in a dungeon. Now we are going to do a safe dungeon. Instead, that you know the kind of condition that human beings had to go through for sometimes 1 month or 2 before the ships came to take them away. We're now going to the female safe section. Please come with me. That's where they go.
almost 1,500 women were lying on this floor. The weak one had their menses, toilet, vomit on this floor, and they were still sleeping on them. This was their source of air. It was connected to a warehouse where they kept guns and gunpowder. Unfortunately, anytime there was a leakage, all was spread throughout the dungeon and polluting the air. As many were dying, their bodies were just carried and dumped deep into the sea. The captives stayed in the dungeon for almost 3 months.
Here is the balcony where the governor was standing to do his selection among the female slaves. With this water, the soldiers were bathing them to look clean. And that was one of the most painful parts of the slave trade.
So what we see here, this is a cannonball. You see, there were 8 here back in the days when the transatlantic was going on, which they had chains fitted on them. So they brought those who refused to be raped here. They tied those chains to their ankles and they left them. As they were here, they were not giving food, they also not giving water. Again, when the rain was shining, they were here. That was to put fear in there. And that was a kind of punishment that the difficult female captives were also doing. Remember, the male captives were killed in the condemned cell slowly, so painfully, just to put fear in their heads.
In July 2016, there was an exhibition in the Elmina castle with the title The Return of the Slaves. About 60 people from Ghana, UK, US, Congo, Nigeria came here to sleep for 12 hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They wanted to show people how the slave trade was going on back those days.
This used to serve as a boardroom where all the major decisions were taken. It has now been transformed to a craft shop.